I flew 12 hours to surprise my husband at his cabin trip and heard him plotting. My name is Isabel Carter. I'm 32 years old, born into a wealthy family that owns a network of private hospitals across the United States. But what set me apart was that I never wanted to live like a privileged heiress. I chose to study medicine, to live simply, and to walk my own path on my own 2 feet. Maybe that's why, when I met Ethan during a work trip to Honduras, I was instantly drawn to him. Ethan was nothing like the men I'd known. He didn't care about my family's name or wealth. He didn't expect me to dress perfectly for every dinner or have an MBA like my ex once did. Ethan came into my life like a breeze, gentle, passionate, full of ideals. He wanted to open a mental health center for victims of war and natural disasters. I believed in that dream as if it was part of his soul. We fell in love quietly, got married after just over a year of knowing each other. We moved to the suburbs of Seattle, into a small wooden house with a backyard full of lavender. Ethan said it would be the perfect home to start his community project. I used my savings to help him pay for grad school, to invest in the company he was building, and more than once I bailed him out of what he called temporary financial hiccups. I never asked for anything in return, except for love and trust. But loving someone doesn't mean you truly know them. 4 months ago, Ethan started traveling more often. He went on inspiration trips to the forests of Colorado, had sudden meetings with potential donors. I didn't question any of it. I was used to being the one in the background, supporting my husband without needing to be part of every step he took. Until one Friday evening, Ethan said he was going to a cabin with his close friends to clear his mind after a stressful week. I nodded. Then, a few hours later, an idea crossed my mind. I would surprise him. I'd book a flight, show up at the cabin, and make him smile with the kind of surprise only a loving wife would think of. I didn't know I was walking into something that would change everything. A journey where, once I landed, I wouldn't find love, but a horrifying truth, raw and cold. I landed in Denver after more than 12 hours of flying and 2 delays. Rain was falling softly. I waited for my luggage, still holding tightly to the bottle of bourbon I had specially ordered from Ethan's favorite shop. I'd chosen the kind he loved most, tied a red ribbon around its neck. Looking down at the small gift in my hand, I smiled to myself, imagining the look on his face when he opened the door. The surprise in his eyes? That delighted smile. The warm embrace. I rented a car and drove nearly 2 hours to the cabin area where Ethan and his friends went every year. It was a remote place, out of cell range, tucked deep in the pine woods. By the time I arrived, night had fallen. There were no streetlights. I stopped in front of cabin number 6. Ethan's car was parked out front. A soft glow came from the side window, along with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. They were gathered together, I thought. I grabbed the bourbon, climbed the wooden steps, heart racing with anticipation. But before I could knock, I heard a voice from inside. Clear, unmistakable, cutting through the thin, weathered wood like a blade. If she disappeared, the insurance payout would solve everything. I froze. Another voice chuckled, half joking, half serious. Then you'd finally get to date her hot little sister without catching heat for it. Glasses clinked again. Then Ethan's voice followed, calm, almost chilling. Think about it. $2 million, all debts gone, and I'd be free. There was no mistake. That was him. The man I had trusted with everything. My husband. His words carved a sharp, icy line through my chest, deeper than any betrayal I'd ever read about in stories. The bourbon nearly slipped from my hand. I managed to hold on. My fingers trembled. My lips went cold. I don't know how long I stood there, unmoving. Every memory flooded my mind like a film on fast forward. The first time I met Ethan. The way he looked at me when he said he loved me. Every morning kiss, every whispered goodnight. All of it. Now just a script in someone else's play. And I was the last naive audience member still sitting in the front row. I slowly stepped back, careful not to make a sound. I placed the bourbon bottle gently on the porch step, slipping off the tag with my name from its neck. My wedding ring caught the light spilling from inside, so bright it made me lower my gaze. I removed it, tucked it into the pocket of my coat. My hands were cold, not because of the weather, but because the truth had frozen my heart. I didn't knock. I didn't confront. I simply turned around and walked quickly back to my car. The engine roared in the stillness of the night. I drove straight out of the cabin area. No destination, no plan. There was only one thought in my mind. I had to survive. And I had to disappear before he had the chance to strike. I drove through the night. No radio, no stops, no looking back. My mind was racing, but my hands stayed firm on the wheel. I knew if I stopped, I'd collapse. And if I collapsed, Ethan would find me. I knew him that well. Ethan had a way of turning harm into justification. He would cry, deny everything, tell me I was imagining things, and I would soften. I had before, many times, but not this time. I stopped in a small town near the New Mexico border. Morning had come. I sat in the car, staring at the steering wheel. My heart ached, but my mind was clear. I pulled out my phone and logged into a private bank account, one my father had set up before I got married, telling me never to share it with anyone. I'd never thought I'd need it. The money was still there, untouched, like a lifeline I didn't know I'd been holding on to long before I ever began to drown. I withdrew $5,000 in cash, then went to a pharmacy to buy a prepaid phone. After that, I drove to another airport more than 200 miles from Denver, where no one would think to trace me. I opened a travel app, searching for the nearest flight out of the country. I didn't think long. I chose Lisbon. The name sounded unfamiliar, distant, further away than anywhere I'd ever been. I bought the ticket under my maiden name, Isabel Langford. I called my assistant, Mara. She was the only person I could trust. She'd worked with me for 4 years. She'd seen me cry behind closed doors and still walk into boardrooms with a smile. I didn't give her details. I just said, I need urgent leave. Please cancel all my appointments for the next 3 months. If anyone asks, especially Ethan, you haven't heard from me. She didn't ask questions. She only said, I understand. Take care of yourself. I hung up, removed the SIM card, and tossed the entire phone in a trash bin. From that moment on, every step I took would have to be calculated, every trace erased. The flight to Lisbon left at midnight. I sat in silence for all 10 hours of it. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I closed my eyes, but my mind kept rewriting everything I once believed to be true. All the times Ethan encouraged me to go ziplining, despite my fear of heights. The boating trips where he asked me to swim just a bit farther. The casual questions about how much my assets were worth. Always phrased as curiosity, always wrapped in charm. I used to think he was adventurous, a free spirit. But now I saw him for what he was, a strategist. Every word of affection was a mask. Every plan was a blade. And I, the woman who once prided herself on being sharp, the woman who helped countless others escape abusive relationships, had been blind in my own. I didn't cry on the plane. I didn't shake. I just felt like part of me had died. But what remained was beginning to be reborn. I kept a low profile in a small apartment in Alfama, Lisbon's oldest neighborhood. No one knew I was there. No social media. No contact with anyone. Nothing that could link me to Isabel Carter, Ethan's wife. I lived like a shadow, but a shadow that was watching. Every morning, I stepped out onto the third-floor balcony, sipping coffee as church bells rang faintly in the distance. Sometimes I forgot who I was. Other times, it all came rushing back. And with it, the fury, like a tide rising in the night. But I didn't let it drown me. I opened my laptop, logged into an anonymous email, and wrote to my personal attorney, Mr. Conway, a man who had worked with my father for over 2 decades. I didn't go into details. I just sent one line. I need information on any life insurance policies in my name, and a full report on all assets connected to Ethan Carter. Strict confidentiality. 2 days later, I received a report over 50 pages long, and it confirmed my worst fear. 3 months after our wedding, Ethan had secretly purchased an additional life insurance policy under my name. The coverage was $5 million. The signature on the document, a near-perfect forgery of mine. The beneficiary, Ethan Carter. It didn't stop there. The financial summary also revealed an offshore account in Belize, opened under his company's name, a company I had solely funded. Every dollar I gave him for development had been gradually moved out of the country. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was bitter. I once prided myself on being smart, strong. But it turned out I'd been moved around like a pawn on a board I didn't even realize I was playing on. I didn't cry anymore. I started fighting back. I emailed my lawyer and asked him to collaborate with a private investigator, the same one who once helped my father handle a high-profile financial fraud case. I wanted everything: Ethan's call logs, wire transfers, and any possible evidence involving a third party. And what I found took my breath away. Over the past 6 months, Ethan had been texting Rebecca, my best friend since college, the maid of honor at my wedding, the woman who used to sleep over at my house every weekend, the one I trusted like a sister. The messages weren't explicit, but they were suggestive. Lines like, "If it happens, I'll be with you." And "She's weak. You're so much stronger than her." And the one that made my stomach turn, "Once it's over, we'll have everything." I retched at the table. My stomach clenched as if I had swallowed poison. For the first time, my rage made my hands tremble. I slammed my fist into the table, shattering a glass. I used to think leaving would be enough. But now I knew. I had to make him pay. I called my lawyer back and gave him instructions to begin immediate legal proceedings. First, freeze all bank assets. Then, revoke Ethan's access to any accounts with my name on them. And finally, prepare an emergency divorce petition with charges including financial fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. I requested printed copies of every piece of evidence: emails, bank statements, voice recordings, legal documents, organized and secured in a black envelope. I wrote one name on the front: Ethan Carter. I didn't send it. I would hand it to him myself. 2 weeks later, I returned to the US. My hair was shorter, my eyes hidden behind brown contact lenses. No more silk dresses or tailored blazers. I looked like someone else entirely. I rented a private car and drove to the house we once called a home. Now it was nothing more than a liar's den. I didn't knock. I rang the doorbell. Ethan answered in wrinkled sweatpants, eyes bloodshot, stubble on his jaw. He looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, he froze. Then he stammered, "Isabel, you..." I walked past him without waiting for permission. I placed the black envelope on the living room table. "Open it, read it, then decide if you want this to end in court or in the headlines." His face changed. He flipped through the papers, jaw clenched tight. When he reached the forged insurance documents, he muttered, "I didn't think you'd find out." I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice calm but sharp like a blade. "You thought wrong." Ethan's expression shifted, from shock to fury. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. Ethan wasn't the kind to surrender. Even when cornered, he still tried to play the game. I stepped closer, just one arm's length away. "You know what's truly terrifying? I used to think I was weak, but the truth is, you're the weak one. You needed me to survive. I don't need you." I pulled out the divorce papers, already signed, and laid them down. "This is your one chance. Sign it. Withdraw from everything. Disappear from my life. Or tomorrow every news outlet will know your name." He stared at the papers, His hands trembled. His lips tightened. He knew he had lost. But men like him, they never admit defeat. And I didn't need him to. All I needed was freedom. Eventually, he signed. I walked out of that house, once called a home, with steadier feet than I'd ever had. The air outside was crisp. A gust of wind lifted my hair, and I felt something fall off my shoulders, something I had been carrying for 3 long years. And just like that, it was gone. I returned to Lisbon, but this time not to run. This time to live. I rented a small studio near the ocean. I picked up painting again, something I had loved before life swept it away. In the mornings, I painted in the sunlight. In the afternoons, I wandered through cobblestone alleys and had coffee with new friends, people who didn't know who my husband was. In the evenings, I wrote my story, not from the lens of a perfect wife, but from the voice of a woman who had survived and stepped out of the shadows. I cut my hair even shorter, bought a red dress, the kind I never dared to wear because Ethan used to say it was too much. I no longer asked how I looked in it. I looked in the mirror and saw myself. No judgment. No permission needed. One afternoon, while arranging my paintings in the studio, a little local girl wandered in, stared at the canvases and said, "Your art looks sad, but strong and beautiful." I smiled. No need to explain. She was right. I had been sad, but now I was strong. 3 months later, I received a message from my lawyer. Ethan had fled the country after being summoned for investigation over fraud and tax evasion. His assets were frozen. Every forged document had been turned over to the FBI. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. One late afternoon, I sat on the balcony, wine in hand, watching the sun disappear behind the horizon. A new friend asked me, "If you could go back, would you have done anything differently?" I paused, then replied, "I used to wish I'd never heard that conversation that night. But if I hadn't, I might have lived a lie for the rest of my life." I raised my glass. Sometimes what saves us is the very thing that breaks us. And what we recover in the end isn't justice. It's ourselves. I once thought ending a marriage would be the most painful thing I'd ever do. But the truth is, what's harder is letting go of the version of yourself you were never meant to be. For 3 years, I wore a mask called the ideal wife. I loved someone who never really existed. I believed in a future built on sweet lies and hollow promises. And I lied to myself too. Now, I don't need anyone to tell me I'm strong. I just need to know. I didn't give up. Every step I take through the quiet streets of Lisbon, every brushstroke on the canvas, every morning I wake up unafraid, is proof that I survived. And more than that, I've come back to life. Not everyone will go through what I did, but if you've ever felt lost, loved the wrong person, or lost yourself in a relationship, you're not alone. And if you're looking for a place to hear stories like this, stories of pain that didn't win, then you've come to the right place. Thank you for listening to Her Side of the Story, where we tell stories that may seem fragile, but in truth, they are the strongest testaments to what it means for a woman to rise when she finally chooses to stand for herself.